I'm really honored to be here with such esteemed and knowledgeable panelists. We have Cristina Tanzola, who is director of the Human Trafficking Program at My Sister's Place, which is a victim services provider and an advocacy group that's doing really important work here in Westchester. And we're going to talk more about what they do as we go through the panel. We have Marcia Cohen, who is Senior Trial Counsel and Project Safe Childhood Coordinator at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. We have Laura Forbes, who is the Cyber Crimes Deputy Bureau Chief in my office, the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. And we have David Ryan, affectionately known still as Chief, but he is actually the retired Chief of the Pound Ridge Police. So we have a really ambitious agenda to get through in an hour. So I'm going to get right into it. We're doing this now in part because it's this past month, January, has been Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. So that is an opportunity for us to think about, what can we do really to help parents, to help providers, to help law enforcement, to help everyone be more aware of what the human trafficking issues are that really may affect us and our children on a day-to-day basis, and how can we prevent it? We know that law enforcement all over the country has been doing webinars and awareness campaigns, and this is a way to really get to our community, hopefully in a really micro detailed way, to let you take home with you some information that's helpful. As I mentioned, our representatives that we have here on the panel, we're really lucky because they're both from federal and state offices. And it's so important in every area of public safety, but I think particularly in this area, to have that coordination, because so often cases start with a simple arrest by a police officer, and we find out later it can lead to a much larger case involving, multiple victims. And it's that state federal coordination that always, but especially here, is so important. And the other important partnership that we have here tonight, and that plays out in these kinds of cases, is the partnership between service providers like My Sister's Place, but there are many others like Hope's Door, Pace Women's Justice Center, Sanctuary for Families, groups that really work hands-on with people who are often victims of sex trafficking or other crimes, and who may be the first responders, so to speak, who interact in the first instance with victims like that, and then have to trust law enforcement enough to bring those victims to law enforcement. So all of those partnerships are so important, and we're lucky here in Westchester to have the Westchester Anti-Trafficking Task Force, which is a group of law enforcement at all levels, service providers, government organizations. So you're kind of seeing that in action here tonight. So what is human trafficking? Promise this is not going to be, a law school class. We're not going to go into the statutes, but just want to give you a general idea of what we're talking about, and then zone in on some of the ones that we think are going to be most important for you to hear about in terms of children. There's really two types of trafficking: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. We're going to focus tonight a little bit more on the sex trafficking, but we will touch a little bit on labor trafficking because it is also very important. When we talk about sex trafficking, both in federal law and state law, and I have the benefit of, I'm now the DA in Westchester, but I was a federal prosecutor for almost 17 years and worked on these cases in that capacity as well. In both federal and state law, there's this really what they make illegal, what is the crime, is we're talking about the use of force, fraud, or coercion to make someone essentially engage in prostitution or have sexual activity for some kind of gain to the trafficker, to the person committing the crime. There also are cases where you don't need force, fraud, or coercion, but the victim, the person who is being required to engage in this activity is underage, under 18, and then you don't need the force, fraud, or coercion. So that's kind of very, very generally the law. There are sort of classic cases that we've seen. In other words, cases where, for example, we had a case in Yonkers several years ago where a woman responded to an ad for a prostitute to work as a prostitute. She thought she was going to an apartment to engage in a prostitution call. And instead she was held captive in this apartment and was going to be sold, essentially, pimped out by the people she had responded to, and they were going to collect the money. Fortunately, in that case, her boyfriend was looking for her, and the Yonkers police responded and were able to rescue her. But that's kind of a classic sex trafficking case that started with something on the internet. She responded to an ad on Backpage and ended up in a horrible situation that fortunately she was able to be rescued from. There's also cases we've seen where someone responds to an ad for a job. They might think they're coming to respond to a job such as a waitress or something. And then they end up getting forced to engage in sexual activity. As you can see, even in those two examples, the internet really has an important role in how these crimes begin. There are now, one of the main areas that we want to talk about tonight is sort of a subset of this, where a lot of the crime actually happens on the internet and over the internet. And what we're talking about there is the sexual exploitation of minors over the internet. And we call that often sextortion. And what that often, the sort of fact pattern of that is that you have a predator, because that's really what they are in these cases, who takes advantage of a minor in some way, either obtaining sexually explicit images from them, some kind of sexual gratification for the predator, or sometimes even is able to lure them into face-to-face meetings that result in sexual contact. We're going to actually show you a really short, just 1-minute video that kind of encapsulates what sextortion is.
Hey, Zach, it's me. I can't stop thinking about you. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. I wanted to give you something special. Who are you? Why are you doing this?
So that video is from the NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children website, and they have longer versions on there, but we wanted to, give you an idea. It's obviously a disturbing video, but it's something that we've seen as prosecutors, as in law enforcement, play out many, many times, where somebody, a young person, sends something over over a chat or somewhere over the internet, and all of a sudden they are sort of in the grip of the predator, and it's very scary. I'm a parent as well as a prosecutor, and this is something I think about all the time, as I know many parents do. So that's a reality that's going to be there. We want to talk more about how we can protect our kids and give you some peace of mind in that way. So first, let's turn to Cristina from my sister's place, who, as I mentioned, works at just an incredible organization. My sister's place, I've worked with them for years. They're so dedicated in this area. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Cristina.
Thank you so much, DA Rocah. I really appreciate you inviting us to this presentation. I know it's a very important topic. So hi, everyone. My name is Cristina Tanzola, and I am the director of our human trafficking program at My Sister's Place. And just as DA Rocah was mentioning, we are an agency here in Westchester where we support survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. We provide an array of services, including counseling, shelter, case management services, and legal services. And I think this is just so great because it has everything in kind of one spot. So in case somebody does need services, they can kind of come to us and we can figure out the best method to assist the person. I think we have some slides. Great. Thank you so much. So as Rocah was mentioning, I think it's important to think about, kind of the picture of who could potentially be trafficked and, what can we think about and what can we expand on in terms of learning more about this issue. I think it is important to mention that trafficking does happen to anyone. There is no one particular group that it affects. However, there are groups that are more vulnerable than others. I listed here just some of the groups that we've seen in our work, and just kind of to focus on how it could be a situation where a trafficker could exploit somebody. If somebody has disabilities, if somebody's LGBTQIA+, adolescents, knowing that this happens in our community, those are all I think important to keep in mind when we're thinking about how trafficking impacts those around us. So one of the things I love to talk about is that my goal is always to expand how we think about trafficking. And I think sex trafficking, as DA Rocah was mentioning, tends to be the one we focus on because it's kind of easier to visualize. And I think it's important to also keep in mind that it really, like I said, happens anywhere. It happens to anyone. I think when we look at, the different spaces we have here, what sticks out is like high schools, colleges, places where there is more of a congregate setting for people. Traffickers take advantage of that. They're strategic. They know who to turn to and where to go to find the most out of victims. Next slide. And so I think it's important, and thank you so much for mentioning this, DA Rocah, that the issue of labor trafficking, while is discussed, sometimes isn't really talked about as often. And I think it's just sometimes because it's harder to pinpoint, it's harder to see. And one of the things to keep in mind as we think about ways to support our young people, our children, our college age kids, is to think about maybe potential situations of labor trafficking that it could impact them. People are getting their first jobs, they're working as nannies, they're working in daycares. And I think just kind of expanding on how there could be a potential for exploitation. Somebody, this is their first job. This is more of a situation that they have, more of an ability to kind of not really know what the protocols are. So I think that's where traffickers really try to, hone in on that. Next slide. So how do traffickers recruit people? I think as the video mentioned, there is a huge use of social media. Our young people, our children, all of us really in some way are utilizing social media. And I think, we'll talk in just a moment about a survivor and her kind of input. I think it's important to keep in mind that this is just a part of people's lives. And same thing, traffickers will take advantage of that type of openness and the ability to reach out to an individual. And sometimes once a person is reached out to through the trafficker, it's a slow and steady process. It's a matter of things that are promised, a support system, quote unquote, a support system that the trafficker will create, utilizing these type of social media aspects. So I think it's important to see, like, how could social media potentially be situations where somebody could be reached out to, to be exploited. Next slide. And how do traffickers use the control? So I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes traffickers, while there are situations where traffickers will kind of find a person right away, maybe make a fake, username or something to get attention, a lot of times traffickers will gain the trust of an individual. It will be slow conversations. It will be text messages. Maybe they've even met the trafficker in person. And I think traffickers will use these methods to make sure that they can control the individual. Because most people, I think we have a gut feeling about things, and traffickers are aware of this. So they will try to find ways to gain trust from somebody before they actually exploit the individual. And then the feeling of being trapped. I think oftentimes when I do presentations, we talk about the fact that, I think there's an image of trafficking, that it's like the movie Taken, that it's something that a person is kidnapped. And while that does, happen, of course, another thing to keep in mind is that, trafficking happens right in front of us, and right in a way that maybe we would not expect. And so a person who is being trafficked feels very trapped. It could be that the trafficker is a person that the family knows. It could be a friend that the family trusts. And so that feeling of fear is a huge way to control somebody. And as we saw in the video, that feeling of, oh my gosh, what happens if this leaks out? What happened if, this relationship or this conversation leaks out? Is a very useful tool that traffickers will have over somebody who may be fearful of what might happen after. And I want to focus on, kind of some of the important reminders. So, with our young people, with our children, with our teenagers, it's very often, and this happens with our clients, it's very rare that a person will self-identify or come forward. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes months. It's very difficult to come forward, sometimes because there may not be a feeling that there's anything wrong. Maybe this is what a person thinks is okay. And so I think it's important, and I think all of us here care about our community, care about our young people. We want to make sure the conversation is open with a person, and there's a bit of patience, because it could be difficult to kind of come right out and say that something is going on. A victim may just be very afraid to say anything. I know that happens often in our work, but also just young people. It's tough to have those conversations, those difficult conversations. Maybe somebody has a complex relationship with the trafficker. They don't want anything to happen to the trafficker. So all of these are things to keep in mind when we're trying to create a support system for somebody who may be a victim. Next slide. And we continue on, especially during this age range, there's a lot of trauma that can happen. There's, a person is growing into themselves. They're trying to create an identity. And because of that, sometimes that can create a space of vulnerability. And again, that's where traffickers find the best method to control somebody. When somebody feels alone or insecure or frustrated for whatever reason, traffickers will take advantage of that. And there could also be other issues happening. Maybe a person has some sort of drug or alcohol addiction that they're afraid to share or get help with. And the trafficker becomes this kind of, they will say they're here to support the victim, but they're not. They're there to exploit them. But it could just be something else that's going on. And I think it's important to keep in mind that victims are not at fault. They are, they're trying, they're afraid. We all just want to be patient and care for them. And also just, you're all here, and it's definitely not to scare anyone. It's really just to definitely keep communication open. That's very, very important. Just trying to have conversations with the person. I know the gut reaction is to just turn off all social media, turn off all computers, but finding a way where you can balance a person's life through social media, because that is a reality, but also just having conversations that are difficult and important. And just one last quote I do want to share. So one of our clients, with permission, gave a bit of her story and wanted to share her quote, her line about what happened. So Tina, that is not our survivor's name, was trafficked for over 2 years. She was sex trafficked. The trafficker actually, she knew for a very long time. He did not make her do any sort of sexual acts at first. It was a long gaining of trust. At a certain point, the trafficker began to force Tina to have sex, not just with himself, but with other men. And it became very violent and very difficult to escape. And so that's the kind of thing she, to acknowledge, is that it takes time. It takes time to create that relationship. And I think, now that our Tina, she's doing great. She's moving on. She's getting counseling and services, but that it takes time, definitely. And I think one of the things she shared, and I think it's important, kind of what we touched on, is that social media is a place we put our public lives out. And so a lot of our lives are out there, and it's very easy to figure out where are those traumas, where are those situations, where are those stories that a trafficker could take and take advantage of it. And so, like I said, we want to kind of create a balance where we're having conversations with our children, our teenagers, to say, tell me what your relationship is with social media, like just having these conversations. It may be difficult, but very important to have. And I think that's exactly what Tina has mentioned, is that, it's kind of right in front of us, and traffickers will take advantage of that. So we want to always make sure we're keeping those lines of communication open, because everybody here cares. So we want to make sure we're supporting that. And then, of course, if you feel that there's trafficking, or you have questions, or you just want to learn more, please feel free to call the Hatchinall hotline. This is a nationwide hotline you can call. They usually will connect with the appropriate service provider. Safe Harbor is our services who work with those who are under 18. Our services are actually for those who are over 18, but still that 18 to 20 range. We work with many clients. So please feel free to call our hotline and reach out to us, and we would be happy to help you out and answer any questions you may have. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cristina. That was really informative, and especially to hear you actually, be the voice of a survivor, as you so often are, and shows, of course, how vital a partner my sister's place is, and you in particular are. So thank you. Our next speaker, I'm really happy, proud to introduce the cybercrimes deputy chief in my office, Laura Forbes, who has been a prosecutor, a state prosecutor for about 22 years. And she has probably done more of these cases at the state level than almost anyone. And she's a real expert. And so I'm going to turn it right over to her to talk about, kind of do a deep dive on how these crimes often can originate online.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So we'll just go right into the slides. So as this slide indicates, online predators can reach much further than you think. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, regularly check your windows and your doors to make sure that they're locked at night, and also when you leave your home various points during the day. However, how many of you check to see who's coming through your children's devices? Many people can and do come through both your devices and your child's devices that could ever fit through your front door in a day or a year. Just think about your own social media usage. How many times do you see messages from people asking to link in or be your friend or be your follower on any of the platforms that you have on social media? And how many times do you even see in your app of choice lists of people who are considered friend suggestions or people you may know? So if this happens to you on your social media platforms, think about how much it happens to your kids, who most likely spend more time on social media than you do. You probably don't entertain a high percentage of your solicitations to connect. But what about your child? Is your child likely to say delete or ignore, or I don't know this person? So here's a quick video about how easy it is for a stranger to engage a child online.
How easy is it for a pedophile to pick up an underage child using social media? Well, today we're gonna find that out. I made a fake profile on Facebook posing as a 15-year-old boy. With the parents' permission, I friend requested 3 girls ages 14, 13, and 12 years old. I've been talking to these girls for the last 3 or 4 days, and today we're supposed to meet up. This first girl, her name is Michaela. She's 13 years old. We've been talking on Facebook for the last couple of days, and we're supposed to meet up at the park later when our parents leave the house. I'm just waiting right now to get the text that our parents have left the house. So I just got a text. My parents just left. I can be at the park in 10 minutes. We're gonna go see if she comes in 10 minutes. We're gonna go right now, set up all the cameras, and just be waiting there for her. So she said she's gonna meet me at the park playground. So this is the closest to her house, she said. So right now I'm texting her that I just got here. All right, we'll just wait, see what she says. She said, okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Oh, she's coming, yep. Michaela? From Facebook. You remember?
Michaela! Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
Sorry.
He could have been a rapist. He could have been a pedophile. Why would you do this?
Sorry.
Yeah, you know that. I could have been anyone. Like, you talked to me for the last 4 days. You've been talking to me on Facebook. Do you know that? Like, you shouldn't talk to strangers, especially online. Like, I wasn't even do I look the same as my picture? Could be even worse than that.
You realize how scary this could have been? Man, we have to talk.
So the man in blue is her father. There are actually 2 other girls who are in subsequent portions of this video. So it shows just how easy it is for strangers to engage in conversations with children, even though they've never met in real life. So the takeaway from this very scary video is, do your children know who they're talking to? And more importantly, do you know? So I just wanted to spend a few minutes giving you some examples of, on the close to home level, cases that I've prosecuted in my time here at the DA's office. So the first slide, this is an individual named Jorge Del Moral. We first learned about him when he was 27 years old. We received information that he had uploaded sexual content of children to 3 different social media pages, all of which were owned by Del Moral. He was subsequently arrested for the sexual content because it is illegal to have these images for personal use. While he was in custody, our forensic investigators here located on his computer videos of young girls and accompanying text strings. So we asked him about where these things came from. And Del Moral admitted that he posed as a girl online, used the social media pages as part of his con to convince young girls to talk to him, and he lured girls onto a camming website in order to speak with them. While he was convincing or trying to convince these girls that he was a girl who wanted to engage in sexual communications with him, he had these girls strip, pose, and engage in sexual acts for his benefit via their webcam. And how he did it, because clearly you can see that he's not a young girl, he claimed that his web camera was broken so that he was able to see the girls, but they couldn't see him. He would only communicate with them via a text chain that was part of the webcamming program. He admitted to our investigators that he would then record the videos and then he would share them with other adults. So he would share them with what he called other like-minded individuals. We located one of the girls with whom he conversed and captured on video. She was 12 years old and she lived out of state with her mom. The girl believed that she truly was speaking with another girl, and she trusted this defendant, this individual, so much that she even gave him her home address. Del Moral went to state prison and became a registered sex offender. Subsequent to his release from state prison, he was charged again criminally when it was discovered that he had email addresses that were not registered with the state of New York, that were as it was required by New York State sex offender rules. Another search warrant in that investigation resulted in us discovering that he again went online, and this time he posted as a 14-year-old girl. We did some more forensic analysis and we located a 10-year-old girl who was communicating with him. Neither this girl nor her family suspected that she was talking to a sexual predator. Next slide. So this is Frank Russo. Frank Russo provided us with another example of children talking to strangers. An investigation led us to a search of Russo's smartphone, and a very observant investigator noticed something odd, which led us to discovering that he was posing online as a teenage boy in order to approach young girls and induce them into sexual conversations. He was approximately 49 years old at the time, married, even though he was posing as a teenage boy. We were able to identify one of his victims, a 12-year-old girl. So he was sent to state prison and is a registered sex offender today. Most significantly, the victims of Russo and Del Moral didn't even know that they were victims until we reached out to them through their local police after going through these defendants' devices. Neither the parents nor the children knew they were speaking with online predators. So this is Robert Okamura. This was an individual who responded to an online advertisement by an investigator with our office. Within hours of initially contacting our undercover officer, this defendant asked the undercover if he was police, and that told him that he was a registered sex offender who wanted to meet a minor for sexual encounters. At the time that he was speaking with our investigator, he was already a registered sex offender for sexually abusing a girl from when she was ages 7 through 11 years old. In a matter of weeks, Okamura was arrested by our office after he came to meet with whom he thought was a 15-year-old girl. The defendant was arrested by our office, and then the case was then transferred for federal prosecution. He was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months federal prison and remains there today. So just quickly, how are predators able to speak with children and not be detected? Well, in addition to the grooming behaviors that Cristina so eloquently described earlier, we see a lot of language during our communications with these predators encouraging secrecy. We see things such as begging for full body pictures or nudes, as they're called, and then saying things like, "Don't tell anyone, it's our secret, and your mom will be mad if she finds out." So we're also seeing a great increase in online sexual extortion of children. DA Rocah played that PSA as part of her talk. We see preteens and teenagers on various platforms approached by someone. They end up on a different platform and soon exchange sexual photos. And then the victim will be extorted for money or additional photos or gift cards. And there's threats that the children themselves will be exposed and they'll get in trouble. We are seeing that there are domestic cases of extortion where our targets are here in the United States. But most commonly right now, what we're seeing that boys are being approached online by people purporting to be girls who are of similar age, but in fact, they're not domestic. We are seeing a significant increase where the people with whom they're talking are actually located in West Africa. So it is truly a threat to our children. So we really encourage parents to really take a look and talk to their kids. And so at this point now, I believe we have our next speaker.
Yep. So we're going to bring on, thank you so much, Laura. Obviously that's, chilling and I'm sure nerve-wracking for parents to hear and yet important. I think the next person, Marcia Cohen, is really qualified to talk to us some more about ideas about how to keep our children safe and how to talk to them about it. Marcia has been a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York for about 24 years. And for a good part of that career, she has really poured her heart and soul into these cases. I had the honor of working with her for many years and seen it firsthand. So Marcia, over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Let's go into the first slide. Okay, you have heard a lot that's very scary. So the question is, what can you do to keep your kids safe? Let me get the next slide. The biggest threat to your child's online safety is your child. What does that mean? What it means is that what your child does online, how they conduct themselves, what they say, what they do is the biggest factor in how safe they are. So what are the things that you need to help your kids understand? You need to help your kids understand that they have to think before they post. Once they've sent something or posted it, they can't get it back. So if they don't want the whole world to see it, they shouldn't send it out. And that is true even if they think they're sharing it with someone that they trust. And it's also true even if they're live streaming or using Snapchat and they think nothing is being recorded. In many investigations, we discover that a defendant has used a second device to record live chats and to record snaps being opened. Let me go to the next slide. So here's the golden rule. If you wouldn't say it or do it in front of your grandma, don't say it or do it online. It's really easy in the heat of the moment to do or say things online that you would never do or say in person. And your goal is to help your kids slow it down by thinking before they post or send. And one way they can do that is by asking themselves, would I be okay if my grandma saw what I was doing or heard what I was saying? Next slide, please. This slide is pretty disturbing. I'm 14 and a bit of a fitness fanatic. I often go powerlifting after school. We've all heard the term stranger danger. The problem is that when you're online, it's not always so easy to tell who's a stranger. And predators are really good at what they do. It's very easy to make a profile online that says you're 14 and use a photo that looks like you're 14. Kids tend to be inherently trusting, and it doesn't always occur to them that the person that they're talking to might be lying about who they say they are. And let me just go back for 1 second. Predators are not just in chat rooms. They're on all of the social media platforms that your children are on. Next slide. So the single best way to protect your kids is to talk to them. You need to have age-appropriate, honest, open conversations about online safety, about the risks of sharing things online, and about the things that predators are doing online to kids. You want your children to know what to look for, and you want them to feel confident about saying no if they're asked to do something that makes them feel uncomfortable. And you want them to know that they can talk to you about what's happening. Let's go to the next slide. So what are some easy ways to open up that conversation? What features or apps are you using? Can you show me how to use them? Have you ever sent or posted something and wished you could take it back? What would you do if someone sent you something that made you feel uncomfortable? And I'd add this to the discussion starters. Tell your kids about the things you heard here this evening and use that as a way to start talking about these issues. One thing I've learned from doing the cases that I do and working with kids is that in general, kids who find themselves in trouble don't tell adults what's going on. They don't want to disappoint or worry or upset their parents. Sometimes they feel like they can't tell anyone because they've already messed up, and it's really embarrassing. So they try to handle things by themselves. You want to help your children understand that you get it. You know what's out there. You understand how complicated it is, and how easy it is for them to find themselves in a really bad situation. And you want to reassure them that even if they did something that you told them never to do, they should still come to you and you'll figure it out together. Let's go to the next slide, which is, we're actually gonna watch this short video.
Okay, so you did a thing. You sent a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Something you thought wouldn't be shared. And in a polite society, cats wear clothes, right? Anyway, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now things have gone wrong, terribly wrong. Maybe you shared the picture with someone you loved and trusted, but after a while, things weren't so friendly. Or they said they'd help you become a star, but they just wanted to use you. Or maybe you met someone online and they really seemed to understand you, but then it got weird, and it turned out to be someone totally different. Now the person you shared the pic with is demanding more and threatening to tell. That's sextortion. Yep, that's a thing. The perpetrator relies on you feeling ashamed and keeping quiet. But they are the ones who should be ashamed. What they are doing is wrong, and it's never too late to find your voice to ask for help, or too early to reach out to your friends to tell them you'll be there no matter what. In fact, you can stop sextortion before it starts by talking about it now. With support, you can do anything, and you can focus on the important business of being cats. So tell your closest friends today you've got their back no matter what.
So we're not quite ready for that slide, but I said before that as a general rule, kids don't tell their parents what's going on. What we see in a lot of cases is that kids do tell their friends. We have investigations that begin because someone told a friend what happened, and the friend told a parent or a trusted adult. The friend realized that it was too big to try to handle it themselves. So I think it's important to recognize that by talking to your children and letting them know what they should be on the lookout for and that they can come to you, you are also empowering your children to be responsible friends. Let's go to the next slide. I want to turn to some concrete things you can do to stack the deck in favor of protecting your child. These are just suggestions. What makes sense for you and your family really depends on your child's age, their maturity, your parenting style, your particular household situation. The thing to remember is that computer and device usage doesn't have to be all or none. You can set in place certain rules. So what are some of those possible rules that might be useful? No phones or tablets or computers in the bedroom at night. No downloading any app without your permission. Requiring privacy settings to be enabled. No online friends who your child doesn't know in real life. No sending photos or forwarding any kind of content without your permission. I think that rule is especially good when kids are just beginning to use a smartphone. Let's go to the next slide. I think you really do need to review the content of your child's devices from time to time. Now, how often and how thoroughly you do that really depends on the same factors I just mentioned. Their age, maturity, your parenting style, your particular situation. It's also going to depend on what you're seeing at home. If your child is suddenly obsessed with being on the phone, changing screens when you walk in, do they seem like they're withdrawing from real life activities so that they can be on their phone or their computer? In terms of the question of whether or not to look at the content of your child's phone, what I would say is this. We see a lot of cases that begin because a parent happens to see something on their child's phone that is deeply disturbing. And I think that all of those parents wish that they had discovered what was happening sooner than they did. So in order to monitor your child's device, you obviously need to be able to get into it. You have to have the password to every device. You should also have the password to any apps your child uses. You should insist that if your child is on social media apps, that they accept you as a follower or a friend so that you can see in real time what they're doing. Next slide, please. Just to review a few of the key things that you want to communicate to your kids. When you're online, all the regular rules from real life apply. Be kind, courteous, cautious, respectful. Keep private things private. There's no guarantee that what you say or send or post is going to stay private. And if something happens, don't try to handle it alone. And finally, look, you want your kids to understand and recognize the risks, but you don't want to terrify them. You should also help them find all the great things that being online has to offer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Marcia. That was really informative. And I think now we are going to have the pleasure of hearing from David Ryan, who, as I said, was the former chief of the Pound Ridge Police Department, where he was for a very long time, 23 years, I believe, and a member of law enforcement more broadly for over 40 years. And now is actually part of the leadership for the Westchester County Office for Women project. He's the project director for the domestic violence high risk team. Even all that I just said doesn't capture Chief Ryan's expertise. especially in this area. So I will turn it over to him now.
Thank you, Mimi. I appreciate that. And thank you for the kind words. So, I'm just going to kind of wrap up here with just, some repetition of what you've heard, because, there's just, there's a common language that we all share when we talk about whether it's human trafficking or online sexual predators. And really what it comes down to for local law enforcement, it's a partnership. It's a partnership with the great skilled people you have on your screen and on this platform here tonight. It's a partnership with the community, with our school districts, with our parents. And really, to me, it's kind of one of the most fundamental elements of community policing. When you look at the internet, and I think it was Laura that said it earlier, you wouldn't open your front door to a stranger. You lock your doors, we lock our cars, we turn on alarms. Yet when we get inside the comfort of our own home, we actually let these individuals potentially into our home. And it's global. The internet is not your next door neighbor. This can be somebody very far away. You really never know who you're communicating with. And just as you wouldn't let that stranger in your front door, we really have to be cognizant of who we are allowing our children to engage with on social media platforms. And to me, communication is the key. You really, sometimes, in partnership with a lot of the things we do in local PDs, we try to work with our parents and help our parents educate our youth about the dangers that are out there. And it all starts with communication. The internet is a very powerful tool. We don't have to be afraid of it. Children shouldn't be afraid of it. They should respect it and realize what it's capable of doing, both on the good side and the bad side. And it starts with the parents really educating their children, set reasonable but enforceable expectations with whatever platforms they're going to be on or whatever devices they're going to be using. Phones, computers, tablets, even video games now interconnect with individuals, which is something we totally forget about sometimes when we buy them the Xboxes and those kind of games. So you just have the dialogue with your kids, discuss your concerns, set ground rules and agree upon them, agree that there will be no secrets. That can be challenging with our youth. My daughter was a victim of sexual predation by an individual years ago, and I had a pretty strict household. So even in my household, even with the ground rules that I set, our youth and kids tend to kind of navigate sometimes the places that they shouldn't go, or just get lured in by predators who are very good at exploiting a vulnerability. At the same time, understand kind of their side of the argument, right? Understand their needs, what they look at the social media platforms as a means to communicate with their friends or family. And they really are a good platform as long as there's ground rules to those platforms. From my perspective, I always encourage parents, especially on those social media platforms, if they don't have their security settings set properly, don't divulge detailed information about yourself, about your family. Hey, my family's going on vacation for the next 3 weeks. We're going to have a great time in Cancun. Well, bad people look at that too, and now they know you're gone. So things like that, just beyond sexual predators, there's a lot of other things that people that are out there kind of scanning the internet for information are looking for. Next slide, please. Thank you. So without getting too much into detail, there are ways you can go onto a computer very simply and look at what are called cookie files, or look at bookmarks, or even look at the history of a computer to see where that computer has navigated, what websites. It's pretty easy to do. I'm not going to give a lesson on it tonight. There's a lot of people out there that are more well-versed in it than me, but anybody that has a little bit of computer background could help you do this. And, it's something we should be doing on our computers and on our phones, as Marcia and Laura said before, see where they're navigating. And by the way, if you go and look at the history or the cookies and you're trying to determine where they've been and it's empty, probably means they deleted it, probably means you have to have a conversation. So if it's not there, ask why not. Beyond that, if you do see something, or if you do believe you are a victim of a crime, you can go to the next slide. What do you do? Well, parents sometimes struggle with calling the police because sometimes they think, do I want to get the police involved? Or, did my child do something that can get them in trouble? at the end of the day, law enforcement is not always about putting people in handcuffs and making arrests. It's a partnership with a community, and it really truly does take a village to raise a child today. And really with all the technology that's out there and all that they have access to, we really do need to work together, because no individual other than the IT experts of the world have the kind of forensic expertise, but we can certainly educate our kids. But call the police. They're there to help. We work with great partners like the DA's office, the county police, real-time crime centers, those entities that have the forensic capabilities to do a lot of research. One of the things we bring up is, do we or don't we notify the platform? We look at those on a case-by-case basis, but certainly those platforms contain evidence that, prosecutors would need if it went to a criminal prosecution. They can preserve the data. They have access to kind of what's been done. Do print screens, save copies of anything, save copies of content, and just note usernames, not necessarily screen names, because screen names are just kind of really a fake identity. We want to look at the URL, look at what's up in the dialog box up at the top of the screen, and just try to get that information so that we can share it with the Marcias and Lauras of the world and the real-time crime and the Intel Center, so they can really dig deep and find out who these individuals are that your kids are communicating with. Some things that you don't do, next slide, don't keep it to yourself. We had a case in Pound Ridge probably about 10 years ago, very similar circumstance that was discussed earlier, where a parent, every time the parent walked by their child's computer, the child would lower the screen of the laptop just enough so the parent couldn't see, and the parent finally said, "What are you doing?" And this child was actually being lured by a registered sex offender that had relocated and not properly registered, and he was passing himself off as a DJ that did Sweet 16 parties. And really, based on some great work by the DA's office and Putnam County Probation, we were able to identify him pretty quickly. And he went back to state prison, but his goal was to lure young girls 16 and under into an apartment that he was illegally staying in Pound Ridge. So don't keep it to yourself. Delete the account. No, don't do it. Again, don't delete comments, don't delete posts, don't delete messages. This is important data that we need if we have to pursue something criminally, especially in these trafficking cases. They get very complicated. They take a very long time, and there's usually a lot of data. These, as I think it was Cristina said it earlier, this is not something that happens overnight. This sometimes grooming process can take a year. And then finally, trust your instincts. If you're not comfortable, and we all know when we're out of our comfort zone, exit, lock off, turn off. Just get out of where you are. That's just the safest, quickest way to keep yourself safe. And then again, if you're that uncomfortable that you exit, log off, and turn off, you need to really speak to a parent or somebody, and just, again, let the people that understand this help educate you and take it to where it's got to go. That's it.
Thank you, Chief Ryan. Thank you to each of our panelists. Each one of you have given us something really valuable to take home and to think about. And, to our audience, I know we gave you a lot of information and it's probably quite overwhelming. That's okay. This is a start, not an end. The idea is to get you thinking about this, to take home some tips and strategies, hopefully. One that I'm going to mention that didn't get mentioned because there's too much to cover, is, tell your kids that if they do find themselves talking, chatting, interacting with someone online who they don't know in real life, and that person wants them to move to another platform, if they're chatting in DMs on Facebook or Instagram, and that person says, hey, let's go over to Snapchat, that should be a real red flag. Alarm bells should go off. So if I actually had to pick one, thing that should set their hair on fire, it's that. And they should cease contact at that moment. So tell them, even if you do what I told you you shouldn't do, once that happens, stop. And they can come tell you, that would be great, because maybe then you can report it, or they can just stop. So I will leave you with that one last parting note. I really want to thank our Spanish interpreters tonight, because it's really important to make sure that everyone in our community hears this and understands what we're talking about. Yvonne Fisher and Cynthia Abad Quintilla. This was recorded, this webinar, and both in English and in Spanish will be available on our website tomorrow at westchesterda.net. And you can reach all of our agencies. I think we have a slide that has all of our contact information. You can invite us into your schools to talk directly to students. You know, that's another great way to do it, in addition to you talking to your kids. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and take care, be safe.